Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Very, very good to be with you this fine Monday, August 17th. Let's get right to the news. We do have a bit of breaking news regarding the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. That would include Iran, Oman, Yemen, and all of the other Gulf state countries. The President of the United States made it clear earlier in the Oval Office today. Well, that wasn't actually the first bit of news. I should be a little bit more fair here. Fox reported initially that the president suggested,
Now, I asked the president about these parallel talks that are taking place between Iran and Oman about control of the Strait of Hormuz. And the president told Fox News, if Oman gets in the way, we'll bomb the S out of them.
And the president wasn't joking. He was asked about this later and gave kind of the, you'll have to wait and see kind of answer.
Last week you said that you would soon declare the Strait of Hormuz to be a territory of the United States. Could you elaborate?
Well, I just think it's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, we control it. We control it with the blockade. We have a blockade. We control it with the blockade. And I like the idea of declaring it a territory.
When might you do that?
We have total control over the strait. Now, they can be a nuisance. They can put a mine in the water, and people don't like having mines hit their billion-dollar ships, et cetera. But the blockade has been very effective. And, we're taking out.
So to pause, kind of clarify, qualify some of these comments as they are. The president is not wrong. The blockade of the United States, the measures put forward by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth have been exceptionally effective. The Iranians suggested that they're going to close off the Strait of Hormuz, and the Trump administration responded with, you need the Strait of Hormuz a lot more than the rest of the world does, and then proceeded to completely eliminate the Iranian economy for the regime from the table. Now, again, this was at the onset of a couple of other military objectives, and then a lot of back and forthing. I mean, we're talking more flip-flopping, flapjacking than an IHOP, and this was a bit of an issue for the administration. But as to the blockade itself, it has been very, very effective. As to declaring the Strait of Hormuz some kind of U.S. territory, there's a couple of questions about declaring a body of water U.S. territory. However, the country of Oman, so on the Arabian Peninsula, on the southeastern chunk below Saudi Arabia, you have the country of Oman, yet another backwater, amazing third world-esque country of the Arabian sort. And very closely, right up near the tip of the Strait of Hormuz, that little bump that turns it into a curve in the waterway, that is also owned by Oman. You might think that the United Arab Emirates controls that piece of land, and the answer is not yet. So the president saying the United States is going to make the Strait of Hormuz, or again, the Persian Gulf here outside of the Gulf of Oman, some kind of U.S. territory, would require the U.S. to control at least the Oman chunk of territory, or Keshem Island, or a number of islands. These are all, of course, options at the president's disposal he has yet to use.
And now maybe that will stop, or maybe it'll open up even further, but we're taking out millions of barrels of oil a week. If you look at the kind of numbers that we're doing, the strait is open, and the oil prices are coming down, and they will continue to come down.
Now, the oil prices, for example, the Brent crude oil, it has done okay. So currently, it's at 91. Again, at its height, just a couple of months ago, we saw it at 112. It was upwards of 114. There was a small spike at the end of July to like 99. It is coming down over time. And that's not really because Iran is selling the oil at a cheaper price, or the OPEC countries are changing their export rates, as much as the world is reshoring the oil transfer and the flow of oil-related products. For example, what refineries are used, when, where, how, to what extent, what capacity certain refineries are being kept on, and the kinds of transportation used to bring those oil and petroleum-related products to the rest of the world. Fertilizer, the kinds of lubricants that keep everything running from your old beater of a vehicle to the latest AI data center, et cetera, ad nauseum. Those kinds of things are reliant on the kinds of crude oil that were typically found near the Strait of Hormuz. But Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, several other countries, including Iraq, even just a smidgen of Syria and Jordan, are rerouting their oil. I believe the technical term is the heck away from the Strait of Hormuz. And that is a long-term thing that the Iranians are never going to get back. They're never going to get back. And Oman's not really going to be able to do a whole lot of anything either. So the reason that Oman and Yemen are now in the conversation. So remember, the Iranians said Yemen is going to be a big, huge thing. It's going to be huge, amazing, just incredible. And we all were going to be just flummoxed and destrabaftened by the amazing Houthi fighting power, and it lasted for about a week. Again, they tried the Hezbollah thing, and it lasted for about 2 weeks. And they tried the Iraqi militias are going to sweep the Kurds, and then that lasted about a week. Now, the very latest card is Oman. So they're going to get the Oman crew ready and raring to go. Maybe they'll host some of the Iranians in the meantime. Oman has been, let's say, diplomatically cricket noises throughout this entire process. Oman does not have the same geographical, if you want to call them, advantages that Yemen does. If Yemen has a whole lot of geographical advantages, at least a couple of mountain ranges for the Houthis to hide out in. So the Iranians are running out of options on the economic stage. But are they going to be able to outlast the United States and this administration? Because if a Democratic administration or an isolationist administration takes over after President Trump is out of office, then Iran's waiting around forever will have been somewhat worth it. And that brings us to the talks on the 60-day end to the MOU.
Unless we decide to do something far more drastic than we're doing. Iran is in big trouble. They have 300% inflation. The country's a mess, and the military is totally defeated.
Okay, a couple of things. And here's the issue for the President of the United States. He still needs to create a defined endpoint in which one of two things happen. And you do need to see one of two things happen, and that we'll get into some of the breaking updates that we are getting right now out of the Middle East, because there is a lot of traffic that is picking up that we haven't really seen for a couple of weeks, but we've done this song and dance before, boys and girls, have we not? Have we not done the intro segment of the show where I've said, hey, it's about 7 p.m. Eastern time, there's a lot of planes in the air and maybe some missiles in the sky. If you look out to your left, you'll see a lot of sand being turned to glass. The thing the President of the United States needs to happen right now is either, number one, he needs balkanization to occur in Iran, meaning that you need a sizable portion of territory, either in the east of the country, close to Pakistan, Turkmenistan, very ethnic region tension country, shout out to Eastern Europe. You need that to break away and get very, very spicy. Number two, you need the Kurds to get busy in Western Iraq, Eastern Iran, and do a little independence declaring. Turkey is a little bit busy with some diplomatic negotiations of a sort with its own tripartite group in the Middle East, so there might be an opportunity for that to happen. But the Kurds are also very wary of trusting anyone at all, because to be fair, they have been screwed over a bunch of times. The third thing that the President of the United States could find very useful is the coalition of the Gulf states, that being the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, the Saudi Arabians, the Israelis probably in this way, at least as far as an intelligence and an air force pattern, Iraq. You need those nations to unilaterally say, hey, remember that time that we eliminated the whole Saddam Hussein issue and we played the Macarena at about half speed and the Gulf War threw across this beautiful column of military force and liberated Kuwait? What if we did that with Oman? If you see territory change hands, the president gets to declare some kind of a win. It is the one upside of the president not really setting an end game. He still somewhat gets to define an end game, but there is a danger. The midterm elections are coming up. And right now, the Iranians still get to hold the cards of doing something spicy enough to set the rest of the world on edge, at least from a media kind of common man perspective. So something has to change. Something has to change. Now, the administration knows this. They've kind of gone silent on a lot of their plans for the military. The media's tried to open the can of worms and tried to force the administration to talk by amplifying some confirmed stories, some not confirmed stories on the USS Abraham Lincoln, that aircraft carrier, as to the conditions on board. That sparked an entirely different conversation among veterans of several previous U.S. conflicts and wars on the conditions of life, on the sea, on extended deployments in the Middle East in general. we're going to have to keep an eye on how some of those things go. I apologize. Radio crew, we do have to send you over to the commercial break. We have to continue on the live stream in the meantime. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Now, in the meantime, what's going on in the Middle East right now? Something that I haven't seen for a couple of weeks, which is why we're starting with this entire thing. So as you recall, there are a couple of Marine groups that are a little bit close to the theater of operations. In the last couple of weeks, they had been performing publicly a series of training exercises, showing them boarding or, let's say, undergoing maneuvers on various islands and beaches and boats and things that are near the water. And what that suggests to the broader world is the Marines are ready to get spicy anytime, any place, anywhere. Number two, the Marines have gone, drastically silent over the last couple of days, meaning that like all of the check it out, we're really cool on the land, on the air, and on the sea. Yeah, we're kind of going a little bit more silent. The same has been the case for the United States Air Force for kind of a lot of the broader CENTCOM strategy, but that's kind of the tea leaf reading. What's actually ceased over the last couple of weeks that is now active as of this evening is GPS and radar jamming. So you don't usually get maps broadcast through the broader media of how different areas are being jammed or interfered with on the electromagnetic spectrum. Really, the only senator that talks about the electromagnetic spectrum much these days is Ted Cruz, and that's on a totally different topic for another time. In the Middle East, the northern section of the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, right near Kuwait, Iraq, and the junction of Iran, that tri-state area, as it were, has just found a beautiful new, very red cloud of radar, GPS, almost full spectrum jamming. There are a couple of reports of people over in Kuwait and near the Abadan refinery that are experiencing a lot of radio difficulties. Now, that doesn't mean something is getting ready to happen. That doesn't mean it's all over or it's happening or anything like that. What it means is that there are a couple of maneuvers, a couple of actions that are in the prep phase. Things are getting ready to happen in some way, shape, or form. And the reason that we know we are coming to that kind of a point is not because the MOU is done. It's not. The MOU meant nothing. There is absolutely nothing of substance to it. Here is the good stuff for you, those of you out there. Right now, there is still a general mobilization of the Saudi Arabian Air Force. There is still a partial mobilization of the security forces in Kuwait, and two different groups that report consistently on some of the border disputes between the United Arab Emirates and Oman have gone rather silent. So at some point here in the next couple of days, I think that you could see the Strait of Hormuz looking a little bit different. Now again, does that mean that the United States is about to go in and seize a bunch of islands and coastlines? No. But the president of the United States understands, and he's talking in this way publicly, something is going to have to give. There doesn't appear to be any kind of, again, the president's saying, any more of this and we're going to bomb the living out of you. No one's really buying it. No one's buying the bluster, the if you don't do this, then we'll do this. If you do this, we won't do this. It has to be either an action or not. Now, again, there are right now 8 refueling tankers that are over and up, at least according to transponder information, in the Middle East. We'll have to see whether that actually amounts to anything or that's just kind of, keeping things up just in case. Now, in Iraq, there are a couple of drones flying back and forth, and there are a couple of strikes that are what appear to be in progress. We're not sure right now if these are Iraqi militias from the Kurds fighting the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. It's always kind of a tit-for-tat kind of a place over there. But what we know right now is that the Iraqi militias are fighting as they normally are. That's the whole news. I'm not making any more out of that than there needs to be. In the meantime, the president of the United States, while again focused on the Strait of Hormuz as the process to alleviate that in order to gain some momentum for the midterms, is focused on the economy. And the job growth numbers are not stellar at the moment. However, the GDP report, some of these other numbers are making things a little bit interesting, at least over the next couple of days. Radio crew, you're joining us back from your commercial break. Welcome back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Let's talk a little bit about some of these 10-year Treasury bonds, the inflation numbers that are and that weren't, because when we dive into the midterm master plans for both parties, Republicans are essentially we need to put a Band-Aid on something and not mess it up. That's where Republicans are at. For the Democrats, they need to establish something that is better for everyone. So far, that's not really a plan. The Democrats who are running for office have a policy, at least at this moment, that is, I'm going to give you free stuff, like free Medicare for all. I'm kind of jumping ahead in the script a little bit, but Abdul el-Sayed, who has quite a few issues we're going to get into this evening, especially what we just covered. Abdul el-Sayed is saying, look, we're going to abolish private health care and, nationalized health care for everybody kind of a thing. Yikes.
What Medicare for All does is it does away with the private insurance market, right? It now has one single payer. That's why we call it single payer, right? One insurance, and that is the government of the United States.
Oh, boy. Okay, so no one ever talks about this. Everyone talks about this in terms of the economic impact, for example, of the AI industry taking a lot of jobs. You do realize that if the entire medical industry in the United States, from research and development up until the provision of healthcare and the reimbursement for healthcare goes completely private, that will quite genuinely and literally run the risk of crashing the economy. Pennsylvania will be hollowed out and destroyed. You ever wonder why though he's very, very progressive, though he is very, very far to the left, you've never actually seen John Fetterman call for the Medicare for all style stuff in the way that the rest of his party has called for it? Because Pittsburgh, after ceasing its function as a very manufacturing heavy town, became the service industry capital of, as much as I hate to call Pennsylvania part of the Midwest, all right, of the Allegheny section of the country, of the original 13 mid-colonies. What you're seeing out of Pennsylvania, that service industry heavy kind of former Rust Belt, now very insurance and medical focused industry, that gets gutted under a Medicare for all system. Especially when, as the Democrats are preaching it, it completely abolishes any kind of incentive profit infrastructure in the United States. You say, well, I don't think that profit should be what motivates medicine. A for-profit infrastructure has created the vast majority of cures, medicines, generic products that end up bringing down certain patents. Certain kind of structures and processes on the other side of the world have been made cheaper and have been made more efficiently, not to mention effectively, by creating a system that before the hyper-cronyism of the late 20th century, early 21st century, effectively eliminated a lot of diseases from the United States entirely. Now, on the other side of the economy, Republicans really need to keep inflation down. Now, the funny thing, and this is the part where I have to admit, I thought that the tariffs were going to take inflation, we're going to tie a firework to an arrow, fire it into the sky, and then the firework was going to rocket boost that inflation as far as it could go. That didn't happen. Now, the Trump administration also suggested the tariffs were going to take inflation and sink it through the floor. Neither of those things happened. We're in a bizarro future world here where the tariffs neither destroyed the world nor saved the world. CNBC, however, has pointed out that the Democrats promised the destruction of the world here, and they're still kind of running on that in the midterms. So if you're Elizabeth Warren, you're just getting made fun of.
The left and people that don't like the president and don't want things to work. And, like Senator Elizabeth Warren will come on and say, inflation's out of control and the economy is getting killed by what's happening by these tariffs. This 3% with the market at new highs, and really we haven't seen inflation, go up back to 3%. Maybe it will this week. Maybe we'll see it. But none of these horrible things have happened, but they still talk like it's happening. It's amazing.
Well, there's an important lesson there. Don't pick a congressman to be your money manager. That's what I would say. But
true.
In the end, Congress has their own reasons to point out certain things. And the Democrats, of course, as you pointed out, really don't want to see the current administration have some success. But there's no doubt that this is some success. We're seeing more horsepower. We're seeing better equities. Inflation really hasn't changed much in the last year or so.
Okay, so now, does that mean that everything is immediately super duper affordable and like easy to grab a hold of? No, but here's the issue. In a midterm election, you don't get the people who come out and vote against a candidate. You don't. You just don't. You don't get the people who come out and vote against the other party as much as you did 24, 26, 28 years ago. Instead, what you're getting in this midterm cycle is people who are just don't really care. They're not excited one way or the other. But if you really want to get people out there, you got to give them something to root for. You got to give them something worth fighting for, Mr. Frodo. And what you're not getting from the Democrats right now is something to fight for. So they've said healthcare for Medicare, for all, for everyone, forever, amen, without any plan of how to pay for it or how to use it. They think, well, we're just going to tax the billionaires. That's how we'll do it. That couldn't even run a healthcare system in this country on any national scale for about 17 days. But all right, so aside from that, what do they have? Because they got to have a little something here. It's telling black people and women that they are too poor and too stupid to buy voter ID of any kind. I'm not joking. This is the actual plan. And you know how you know it's the plan? Because it's coming out in all of the big battleground, tooth and nail dagger fight, like super big Senate races. Because the House, the Democrats are convinced they're going to take back the House. Guys, the entire election map of like several states has changed. And also, again, I'm not seeing any really inspiring Democratic candidates. Don't even get me started on all of the candidates in the South, especially on the Democrat side of the aisle, who are in full panic mode because they're not getting any money at all. In fact, all of the Act Blue money, which we're going to get to later on in the show, is being diverted away from those battleground districts and towards the socialists. Like AOC and Bernie have essentially grabbed the valve of Act Blue, which is currently under investigation for taking foreign money, very illegal in an election, and diverting it away from the battleground kind of Obama coalition Democrats over to the socialists. In battleground states like Texas, James Tallarico is raising money. So what's the strategy and what is the big move? Black people and women are too dumb to get voter ID and they're too poor to get voter ID in Texas. Woof.
We as human beings have the right to shape our own destinies, and we do that through the vote. And so many brave Americans, so many brave Black Americans have fought and died for that right. And so for politicians in Austin or in Washington, as they're now doing with the SAVE Act, they are trying to rob our neighbors, particularly our Black neighbors, of those God-given rights. So I have a track record of using every tool in my toolbox to protect voting rights.
I'm sorry. Por favor, ¿qué? Excuse me? Hang on.
We as Americans have fought and died for that right. And so for politicians in Austin or in Washington, as they're now doing with the SAVE Act, they are trying to rob our neighbors, particularly our Black neighbors, of those God-given rights.
Robbing our Black neighbors of those God-given rights? What are you talking about? Oh, you mean the Save America Act. The Save America Act, which requires you to have, again, proof of citizenship and your ID in order to register to vote. Which means, and a lot of Democrats are saying it means passport bill. You could get a passport. That's true. You absolutely could get a passport because that proves both. But you could also get a birth certificate and here's the fun here. A Save like real ID compliant ID. That either means just a real ID that you can get from your state in most states and commonwealths, or your driver's license, which most people in this country already have. Now, we actually did the math. We did. In Texas, where James Tallarico is the Senate nominee for the Democrats, in Texas, to get your birth certificate for the first time, it is $23. Now, it's actually $22 if you're ordering it just online. But if you go to your local health department in person, they charge you an extra buck. So it's $23 to get a real ID compliant card. So don't have a driver's license. You're just in the state. It costs $16. James Tallarico, the Senate Democrat nominee, is openly telling everyone that Black people in Texas, Black Texans, are too stupid and too poor to come up with $39.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
That's insane. That's insane. And by the way, that's assuming that you already don't have one of those two things, which most Americans, especially most Texans, definitely already have at least one, if not both of those. Radio crew, we're going to send you guys over to the commercial break. We're going to continue over here on the live stream because it's a lot worse than just James Tallarico. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal. Now, guys, look, candidates have been saying this kind of stupid crap for a very, 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 very long time. They have. I mean, for example, Mazie Hirono, Hawaii Democrat senator.
There's this huge push to pass the SAVE Act. It's more Save Trump Act. And what does that act do? It would require millions and millions, all of us who are registered to vote, suddenly we will have to show proof of citizenship, either through a birth certificate or a passport. Millions of people don't have either.
Okay, so first of all, you can very easily get a birth certificate or if you're an immigrant, a certificate of nationalization. It's very easy to get either of those. You say, I don't know how I can't get it. Okay, it may be an annoying thing for like 2 or 3 minutes. It is not your right to bypass very basic proofs of citizenship in order to, again, as we've seen based on the voter fraud that has occurred in this country, including not even by a means of malice, but just by the failures of these automated systems to register people correctly. Having a birth certificate or a certificate of naturalization is something you should have. And if you don't, your health department where you were born very likely has all of that information. Just need you to pick them up and give them a call. Even in the state of Hawaii, it just so happens that I want to make sure let me pull up the fancy spreadsheet of justice here. For the state of Hawaii, to get your birth certificate, it is $10. Mazie Hirono, women are too dumb in Hawaii to come up with $10. It is $40 for a real ID compliance card if you're not renewing any kind of a license or ID of any kind or sort. And you need a real ID that is compliant to buy like half the things on the island of Hawaii. So you're telling me that women and black people are too poor to come up with $50? In Hawaii, that's just breakfast. Not the smartest of moves. Not the smart. And by the way, this is why when Democrats are pushed, I mean, really, really, really pushed on this, they won't say it. They're running for high elections. Abdul al-Sayed is an excellent example of this right here, right now. Abdul knows that if he says what the rest of us understand, if he says that Michigan black voters and women are too stupid to throw a couple of bucks together, Mike Rogers is going to boot stomp him harder than he already is. That's why when Abdul is mentioning this, he wants to fearmonger about the Save America Act. He doesn't get specifico, and there's a good reason why.
But yeah, we know what they're going to do. We know how they're going to operate. We know that the Trump administration is setting up for something. But if enough of us go out to the polls, we decide that we will not be denied our voice in our politics, that we all step up and fight back. All this talk of the quote unquote SAVE Act, all this talk of quote unquote rigged elections is over. You beat them bad enough, they're just beaten. That's just how it is.
The fear mongering is for a reason. It is. You got to have something that gets the voters out, but there's really nothing in this Trump administration so far other than, like, I guess ICE in some cities, kind of, but like suburban liberal woman anger. Guys, we've had HOAs for a long time. And yeah, you may be able to tap into that for a brief second. A lot of Americans are getting really, really, really tired of it. They're getting really exhausted of it. And that's not going to be enough to drive huge district pushes. Now, in the meantime, again, you still have the same Democratic crews that are desperately trying to paint this as, again, the Kathy Hochul approach was suggesting that black children in New York had never heard of a computer because they're too stupid and poor. And that was a very dumb thing to say. But running with this, the Save America Act is going to kill us all. No. Radio crew, welcome back from the commercial break. One last thing on this. The best example of just driving this straight into the dirt and giving Republicans all of the campaign ads that they want from now until the end of time. While we are seeing, again, whether it's by malice or by ignorance, there are errors in the voting system. It doesn't even have to be someone in the background, laughing like a 1930s guy. Like, that isn't that kind of a thing. It could just be the system fails. It could just be that we need to relook at how some of these processes are carried out for voter registration and vote counting, tallying. When you have weird errors, flash drives downloading the wrong file in Detroit, when you have yet another series of cases in the Western United States brought up on voter fraud or voter registration malpractice, or simply putting the wrong forms and the wrong names and the wrong kind of systems, it would make sense to reform some of the trust, or I should say refound some trust in American institutions by retrofitting this. It is so wildly popular with Americans, it's not funny. Now, I know that I've played this before. It's worth playing again here. The polling numbers on this are so concrete, it hurts.
Take a look here. Favorite photo ID to vote. 85% of white people favor it. 82% of Latino. 76% of black Americans favor it. So the bottom line is this. Voter ID is not controversial in this country. A photo ID to vote is not controversial in this country. It is not controversial by party, and it is not controversial by race.
So therefore, if photo ID works and real ID compliance is where everything is going in any state, any place, anywhere. Again, not just showing your Blockbuster card that you still have lying around for some reason and saying, oh, yes, I'm here. When you have these issues and then you have investigations in which Cam Higbee and James O'Keefe go up and show you how easy it would be to theoretically commit voter fraud in Minnesota by showing up and saying, oh, vouch, I vouch. And you show no voter ID. You're wearing the burqa, the hijab, and you just have all these other people, because in Minnesota, there's one person there, technically, theoretically, who's supposed to have voter ID, they can vouch for 7 other people, which is insane. There's no way that should be legal at all. And yet, here we are. That's the kind of system that's been set up. So setting up very basic photo ID requirements, the other half of that is just a birth certificate. And the argument and the counter to that is, well, people that aren't citizens, they never vote anyway, so that's not a problem. And then you see in New Jersey, in which over 400 non-citizens ended up voting. And when the Trump administration says, hey, you should let us take a look at those voter rolls, Governor Mickey Sherrill, Democrat of New Jersey, said no and then sued the Trump administration over it. Guys, that's a bad look. It's a bad look when you have congresswomen like Democrat Representative Yvette Clarke from New York saying this.
My hope is that we will push and really apply as much pressure to the U.S. Senate to do this work as they are pushing in terms of the SAVE Act to strip Americans and black communities of their right to vote.
Okay, so you've got the really stupid positions. You have the really awful things that Democrats are calling for. Okay, sure, day ending in Y, I got it, I hear you. But certainly for some of these candidates, because the DSA is also a big, huge chunk of this, certainly you would actually see at some point, in some way, shape, or form, some kind of a pitch to change something about these candidates, because they're not gaining in the popularity. James Tallarico, he's trying to secure the Democratic base in the independents, and he's not making up the ground that he needs to be. On the Republican side, sure. You've got the Attorney General, Ken Paxton. He's not really exciting a lot of Republicans in Texas, but that's not the question. The question is whether you're going to see the James Tallarico crew really get some people going. Abdul al-Sayed, are you really going to get some people going forward? He not only has the issue on what he's pitching, and Michigan is a crucial election. Democrats cannot afford to be losing seats in the Senate. You get into a situation where Republicans are possibly picking up purple seats, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter if former Governor Roy Cooper in North Carolina beats Michael Whatley, who's running an oatmeal mediocre campaign of his own fault. I told him he should have stayed as co-chair of the RNC, but he didn't listen to me. While you have that nonsense going on, if Republicans are swapping seats in Michigan and Mike Rogers is stopping Abdul al-Sayed, Abdul's got to do something. He can't even get rid of the left-wing socialist insane asylum on a stream, Hassan Piker, despite everyone calling for it.
You know, you talk about not quite getting over the finish line, but it's not like he won in a landslide. I mean, this was closer than anybody expected.
So the Fox News reporter here, or anchor, I should say, is talking to Haley Stevens, the weird SpongeBob mixed with Chris Farley, mixed with Joe Biden, in his hyped up, coked up campaign days and his rerun for the presidency there. Haley Stevens, who lost to Abdul al-Sayed by a smidgen and a sliver, who, together with Detroit, embarrassed Abdul al-Sayed, again, who won all of the youthful college, overly educated, again, Ann Arbor and the college towns, and lost the working man vote that he was so promised. Haley Stevens, what does he need to change?
And the electability case that you made during your campaign is now bearing out. I mean, more than half of the electorate in your state, 54%, say they're concerned that al-Sayed's positions are too extreme. If you break it down further, twice as many Democrats are concerned that he's too extreme as Republicans who are concerned that Mike Rogers is too close to President Trump. Would you call on Abdul al-Sayed today to moderate on any specific issues?
Now, the answer to this should be yes. He should be more like John Fetterman, should be exactly what she says. She should. That's what she should say. She should say, look, Trump just needs to pull back and just stop being so out there. That would maybe, now, is that really a good pitch? No. The Democrats have been boxed into a weird corner, though, because Trump has been somewhat kind of Bill Clinton on his populism on the economy. And on law enforcement, he's been rather normal. That's really, so what do you push back on there? Well, I just think that Trump should calm down is still a very weak message, but that's fine. And that's what she should say about Hassan Piker, or excuse me, not Hassan, well, Abdul and Hassan Piker are rather close. She should say that Abdul should abandon the socialist crap, that he should cut his ties with the Islamic terror organizations, and that he should be, more normal. She's not going to do that, though. As close as she can get, though, is say, maybe he should stop hanging out with the guy who electrotherapies his dog and killed a bunch of dogs. Well, no, that was Abdul, not Hassan Piker. Whoops. And then also maybe he should stop hanging out with the guy that said 9/11 was good and America deserved it, and also says that we should kill Republican senators. Yeesh.
Well, look, it certainly makes sense to get rid of this Hassan Piker affiliation. I'm calling on that. I've continued to call on that. My friend and mentor, Keith Williams, who is a Detroiter, who is chair of the Michigan Democratic Party Black Caucus, he and I spend a lot of time together, brainstorming, putting down some of these, how do we build the American dream notions.
By the way, just to be clear here, as the senior national correspondent for the Daily Signal, whose job during the day is to go on TV and answer questions. When you're doing this, you're stalling. You're futzing around the answer instead of just saying, yes, he should step away from these things. These are the three things. Saying, well, I've been spending time in the back rooms there with my friend, and we've been brainstorming, just, really putting a meteorological mindstorm together here, trying to think of ways that we could conceive to reach the voter. Guys, the voters, what are you talking about? This is the most social media heavy age of all time. You can find out what the people are thinking. But she doesn't want to say what the people are thinking, because then she would go, maybe Abdul should stop slamming the voter ID and stop hugging up to the Islamic coalition there.
Here in a place called Michigan. And look.
A place called Michigan. Slip my wrists.
Any day of the week, the Democratic plan, if you're Alyssa Slotkin or Abdul, your plan for healthcare is better than Mike Rogers. Your plan for democracy is better than Mike Rogers. Your plan for Black-owned businesses is better than Mike Rogers.
But again, no. That's the catch. No, you want to actually provide some oomph, some stuff to it? Then you got to tell us what the plans are. What are the plans for black businesses as you're talking about? The Brandon Johnson approach from Chicago? Giving artificially, very illegal loans based on skin color? That's your counter suggestion for Abdul? Yeah, I really don't think that's the move. I don't think that's the move. Meanwhile, the other side of the Democrats' midterm plan is passing a law to make it easier on criminals if it was, if they were really, really, really hungry when they broke the law. If they really, really needed to break the law, then we'll make it easier on them. Essentially meaning this, if you looted a store, but it was in the middle of a storm, well, then, hey, that's the move.
The amendments make it clear that this policy only applies to low-level theft crimes, no felonies, and codifies case law.
California, going all in here. California State Assemblywoman, because the California State Assembly is just cancer mixed with the clap. Incredible. And it is, by the way, remember, Gavin Newsom wants to be the president in 2028. So Make America California is one half of the Democrat planks for this country. That is a huge chunk of their party. Incredible. Beautiful, beautiful stuff, by the way. To that point, Radio Crew will send you guys over to the commercial break. We're going to continue with this joy over online. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. By the way, it appears I may have implied the flash drive situation was Detroit. I apologize. And that was Milwaukee. The 5 flash drives, that would be the Milwaukee primary election in which they downloaded the analytics or the analysis instead of the actual votes. No, that wasn't in Detroit. Detroit's just where Haley Stevens beat, Abdul El-Sayed. Anyway, so California has put forward this law that they suggest that they say is just if somebody, if like a homeless man steals something, then he gets a lesser sentence. If you steal something, you get thrown in jail. But like if he steals something, well, I mean, he probably really, really needed it for, his free California crack pipes.
While we have diversion programs for drugs and mental health, we do not have the same for crimes of necessity led by poverty.
I mean, what's a crime of necessity?
Well, socialism is theft. So no wonder they support it. These are people who can't produce, so they steal instead.
Okay, so the Republican counter there, it's theft, it's socialism. All right, sure. As to the Democrat plan right now, just doing what's on your mind and going further and further and further to the left is probably not the best move. Probably not. It really isn't. Making these maneuvers and suggesting that you are going to treat people differently under the law based on their need to do so, kind of the crime of passion argument, that's been pretty fairly shredded at the federal court level. Whether California wants to pass these little assembly bills or not, it's really not going to drive vote. And you say, well, what does state policies matter? I will remind you that it is the state policies on gender that drove a ton of support away from Democrats and to Republicans. This is the last big election that Republicans really have to get through before you start seeing the major shifts in electoral college votes. 2028 following this a little bit more, but the last couple of elections before you start seeing Texas and Florida really grow in electoral college votes, New York, California, Michigan, Illinois, other left-wing states shrink as people flee those states. This crime idea that the left is going on, suggesting that American prisons and jails are evil and that people are only committing crimes because they've just had a real rough go of it. I don't suggest that's your best move. I don't think it's a good call. I don't think it's very smart or wise. But alas, when has that ever stopped them? We could talk more about the Hassan Piker disaster, but I wanted to move over to this thing. I didn't mean to tease it, but a little bit earlier. AOC, Bernie Sanders, Abdul El-Sayed, they're raising money as hard as they can and as fast as they can. And they're not raising it through the Democratic National Committee because they're very broken in debt. Instead, they are raising it through Act Blue. Now, we've covered Act Blue here on the show before. It is an online funding platform where you, apparently from anywhere around the globe, can give money to Democrats in the United States, and then Act Blue takes that money and then doles it out as they see fit. They are currently under a congressional investigation because Act Blue, allegedly, took lots of money from foreign funders and did not check whether or not those donors were foreign before they took the money. It just kind of, slipped their mind, whoops. Oh, totally just an accident, just a mistake. I love it so much. Radio crew, welcome back from the commercial break. Their money machine is at it again. AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Abdul El-Sayed are raising as much as they can right now through Act Blue in the middle of this congressional investigation. So now there is a viral video showing an 88-year-old woman, I believe, disputing nearly $150,000 in political donations that were recorded in her name. This is obviously fueling a lot of fresh alarm over the Democrat nonsense because this lady is living in squalor, but apparently she's 150,000 super duper mega donor.
Well, here we are out in the deep, thick country of Michigan looking for one Elizabeth Waffle.
Now, to be clear, I this is just going to be a small Midwestern gripe. I don't really care for like the Deliverance banjo riff in the background coming from the hillbilly hick part of the Midwest myself. But anywho, other than Dueling Banjos, which is a phenomenal song.
88 years old, donated nearly $150,000 in the last 5 years to Democratic causes. This is one of El-Sayed's micro donors. Doesn't look like the Taj Mahal by any means. Come along. Where's the house? Okay, if I'm not back in 5 minutes, call somebody.
Okay, so a little bit of the dramatic, independent journalism stuff here.
Hi, madam.
Okay.
Pleasure. My name's Charlie. Are you Elizabeth Waffle?
Yeah.
It says here that you've donated $150,000 in the last 5 years to various campaigns, and that you've made nearly 15,000 donations.
I doubt it.
Now, this was about I believe it's this right now. This is about a month old. The reason that I'm sharing this with you now is there are now a couple of federal looky-loos that are starting to dig through some of Act Blue's records based on essentially finding these individuals. And this is probably the most famous ones, why we're showing it to you. There are now two other cases, one in Pennsylvania and one in Nevada, in which other individuals have been claimed to have donated all of this amount of money to Act Blue through, these direct donation periods over the last 5 to 10 years. And it just so happens that these individuals have no recollection. They have no actual financial receipts for any of this kind of data. Now the congressional committees are starting to look through it. And if the congressional committees are starting to look through it, you say, what does that mean? Just going to be an angry letter? If the congressional record shows a certain committee that is looking through something, this gives Attorney General Todd Blanche a good amount of window to start digging into these cases. And if the Attorney General starts digging into some of these cases, you could theoretically get a federal injunction on Act Blue being allowed to transfer money in or out over the next couple of months, which would be a death knell for Democrats in this particular election cycle. That's where this is going. That's the real catch here. Because over the last couple of years, and by the way, the comment section has pointed it out absolutely correctly, some of these videos have been going on for years. But where does the rubber actually meet the road here? Well, either one of two things can happen, and it's incumbent on the Department of Justice and the federal attorneys to make these cases. Now, number one, you can either have a federal judge say that there is an issue with voter and donor registration through the Federal Election Commission, suggesting that these are individuals that have been signed up to vote, and perhaps there is another person of this first and last name in another part of the state, and the address just got wrong. Just a simple issue of reporting. If that's true, then there might be a necessity to halt everything for a moment in an injunction until the reporting information is deemed accurate for out-of-district, out-of-state, or out-of-country voting concerns. Number two, you can suggest that there is a case of wire fraud or campaign finance, certain kinds of violations of campaign finance law, and Act Blue can be hit with some kind of an injunction to cease operation until an investigation is concluded. Has this happened before? Yeah, several times in the last 30 years, you have seen a federal government investigation shut down a major operation, including in the middle of election season, sometimes to some considerable controversy because money was flowing in and out in a way that just didn't look quite right. And yes, by the way, some of the questions as to whether or not these are certain kinds of identity theft, and we'll see if some of these cases are willing to be brought. This does bring us over to some of the very strange federal court shenanigans. So the Ninth Circuit has ruled that a Trump administration appointee is unlawfully serving as Nevada's acting U.S. attorney, Sijal Chata. Now, I'm probably pronouncing the name wrong, and you know what? Sometimes that does indeed happen. They held that the Trump administration cannot bypass federal vacancy limits by naming her first assistant after the vacancy arose or delegating her all of the office's powers. So essentially what happened is that the Trump administration ran out on a timer for this particular appointee, and the Trump administration simply gave the power of this federal judge to the person who was closest to that judge, who had all of the available information and access to how certain cases were proceeding, the arguments for certain things. This could be alleviated by giving the Trump administration recess appointments. And that brings us over to the next issue for Congress right now. On the Republican side of the aisle, I do want to kind of do my best here to dive into right now, at least Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Right now with what the Republicans are doing, they're in the middle of their August recess. It's not a full recess. And so one of the things that is keeping Republicans from generating some momentum with their constituents for re-election campaigns in the House of Representatives, as well as in some of these key Senate elections, is that you don't even have Republican senators and representatives doing the things that they promised to do in Congress. This goes to what some of your comments have been over on the live stream side of things. Some of you have been commenting throughout the show that some of the things that I've mentioned are kind of useless because whether it's Democrats and their issues with Act Blue, whether it's Democrats and their proposals on healthcare, Medicare for all, and who knows whoever's going to pay for it, on crime policy, on immigration policy, whatever, Republicans aren't even doing anything in the first place. And you would be right. Now, in the House is actually doing a little bit more than you see over in the Senate, but still, you're still getting a lot of Republican committees that are only writing strongly worded letters over on the House. That irks people. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, you have Senate Majority Leader John Thune that's not even allowing the president to carry out a number of recess appointments that are consistent with previous administrations on both the left and the right. So in the same way that I've said that at some point here, I've said in the next couple of months for the Trump administration on foreign policy, for the congressional policy side of things, in the next couple of years, something is going to have to give for voters to actually care enough to come out for Republican or Democrat candidates. Radio crew, we're going to have to send you out for the evening. We have a little bit more to cover on the live stream side of things, including Abdul Sayed's really ugly moments. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Now, while they're out, before I pivot over to the very, very bizarre updates on Abdul El-Sayed in Michigan, this from August 15th. A federal district judge entered an administrative stay trying to prevent the Department of Homeland Security from obtaining roughly 17 million commercials driver's licenses and their records that it subpoenaed for immigration enforcement, which is very, very, very strange. So this order bars the Department of Homeland Security, it's Judge Anthony Trenga, from receiving, he barred the Department of Homeland Security from receiving the subpoenaed records and requires the Department of Homeland Security to tell the AAMVA not to produce them. If the Department of Homeland Security receives any records anyway, it has to immediately return them without inspecting them. And then said that the hearing on this is set for August 20th, that's in 3 days. So this is where this particular stay gets a bit bizarre, and this is going to be really spicy here in the next couple of days. It's a huge issue in the Midwestern United States, and it is, believe it or not, a top 10 voter issue. A lot of voters in the country do not feel safe anymore on interstates because of the CDL situation and illegal immigrants and migrants right now. Now, let's dive into it. I'm trying to get kind of a summary on the court opinions. I told you on some of this stuff tonight, we're flying by the seat of our pants because the federal court decisions coming out today and in the last couple of days over the weekend are just wild and kind of disparate and disconnected. It's still news though. You know, we got to talk this through. And I see the comment from Free State Florida gal, can't we just get rid of these judges? No, you can't. And the reason that you can't is because it takes not only an actual impeachment vote in the House, then you got to get a 2/3 vote in the Senate to remove them. You're going to have to either adjust some constitutional framework or pass a new law on federal judges in order to get that thing started. But that's another tale for another time. Judge Anthony Trenga did not analyze the traditional equitable relief factors of this particular Department of Homeland Security policy. He said more time was needed to consider the motion to quash that the, quote, ends of justice required an administrative stay. Essentially what this means is he's just pausing for a second before the Department of Homeland Security says, this is kind of national emergency status. You need to let us see all commercial driver's licenses because these people are cleared for interstate travel with very, very heavy equipment. And this judge recognizes that once he allows the Department of Homeland Security to do this, it could allow the federal government to invalidate commercial driver's licenses for those who shouldn't have them, even if they are given by a state government. That allows a question of constitutional crisis territory and the freedom of interstate travel mixed with whether a state or the federal government can determine whether or not you're qualified to transport very heavy material. For example, hazardous materials have to be registered on a federal level. Well, Tony Kinnett here, just because Indiana says, sure, you can transport highly toxic material, I can't truck that through Illinois. That's not allowed. That's a federal level alert. So we're going to get into some really fun bureaucratic territory that, believe it or not, just like the U.S. Postal Service situation, really favors the Trump administration. Because here's the secret. This is all going to boil down to the average American. For a long time, your parents, your grandparents, through the 1900s, all right, through the 20th century, when all of the bureaucratic garbage was being piled on top of itself, from Woodrow Wilson all the way through FDR and then through the Cold War following, the administrative state was built at least still on a few fundamental common sense beliefs, which is why Eisenhower was able to go through a massive deportation campaign. There wasn't all of this really bizarre, compassionate suicide that was collectively brought about in what we're now finding is through the post-liberal era of the United States, when some of these bureaucratic loopholes and procedures and rules and administrative bits and bobs, dots and tittles, were being set up. And even though Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts often will side with some of the liberal Supreme Court justices on some of these administrative readings, it's not going to get them through on everything. And the commercial's driver's licenses bit, it's likely going to be one of them. Now, that all said, allow me to El Sayed, no, nobody? All right, sorry. Abdul El Sayed, and his really, really bizarre, weird Islamic connection stuff. Before we do so, I do want to take a moment to talk about the excellence of our sponsors, and that would be the Alliance Defending Freedom. So it's hard to know what to say when timeless truths are challenged, like the definitions of simple words like man or woman. It can send an entire women's basketball league into a titter. Gender ideology, it's permeated almost every area of public life, including your kids' school, sports, medical ethics, and religious freedom. And if you're not sure how to navigate all of that, you're not alone. That's exactly why the Alliance Defending Freedom, proud to have them as sponsors of the show, they've created a free 5-part video series to help you respond to the destructive lies of gender ideology with facts fortified by grace. You'll hear from experienced attorneys on how this ideology is affecting the culture and how you can advocate for your beliefs and freedoms. Get the free series right to your inbox at joinadf.com/Tony. That's right. There's no cost to this. They're just a great crew of folks. Joinadf.com/Tony and equip yourself to stand for truth with confidence and clarity. All right. Now, last, I want to talk to you just a little bit about Abdul El Sayed and his very, you know what? I'm not really going to say bizarre, just his embarrassingly obvious Islamic nonsense. So Abdul El Sayed is trying a very interesting approach right now. He's trying a very, very interesting approach. Now, I do want to make this clear up front. The polling does not favor Abdul El Sayed against Mike Rogers, but he's still trying it. And additionally, he is also in the process of suggesting that the reason Republicans don't like him is simply because of his name, Abdul El Sayed. So he has now suggested, which is, again, a curious thing to suggest, that Republicans just don't like his name. Like the name Abdul El Sayed is giving everyone the spook 'em, shake 'em ups. So he's had several tweets. For example, on August the 16th, yesterday, he said, "My name is not raising your gas prices. My name is not the reason we're in an illegal war. My name is not the reason you can't afford your health care. My name is not the reason that you can't afford your rent or your insurance." Okay. That's not the reason that people don't like him. The name part, that's gaslighting. We all understand this. It's that he just so happens, in addition to all of this crazy socialist crap, he happens to be simping for the Dearborn voters. And for that, we got on Josh Hammer. He's the editor at large over at Newsweek. Excellent show as well over on Newsweek in Salem. You're going to enjoy this one. Joining us is Josh Hammer, good friend of the show. It's been a hot second since you've been on, but I know that you haven't stopped all of the work that you're currently doing. I know that Abdul El Sayed up in Michigan, he's running on his name. He says, "Hey, my name didn't send us to illegal wars. My name didn't." They're very, very strange tweets. And I don't think that people are upset about the name this guy has. It's a little weird.
Yeah, Tony, great to be back with you. So it's more than a little weird. I think he's trying to play the victim card. The left has a very long and inglorious history of playing the victim card. Unfortunately, Abdul El Sayed, even though he is very glib, he's very well spoken, he's very well educated for that matter. I think he went to Oxford. He's a doctor. He's this, he's that. He's the perfect specimen in many ways. Unfortunately, to be a Trojan horse to disseminate a radical ideology. So there's been all sorts of great investigative work that's just come recently to surface. including my good friend Ben Weingarten over at Real Clear Investigations. And they've done some of the homework and showed that overall, Abdul al-Sayed was the recipient of $115,000 in donations from individuals tied to CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is hardly just the civil rights organization that it might sound like from that somewhat innocuous title. CARE was an unindicted co-conspirator named by a federal judge as such in the largest terror financing case at the time to date in American history, the Holy Land Foundation case back in 2008. CARE was actually designated a terrorist organization by the United Arab Emirates, in 2014, more recently by the states of Texas and my state of Florida just over the past year or so. And also, it turns out that Abdul al-Sayed's father-in-law is not just on the board of CARE's Michigan chapter, is also a founding member of another organization called ISNA, the Islamic Society in North America, which also was named an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation case. What were they charged with doing? Oh, yeah, they were just funneling money to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood because CARE was basically founded as a Hamas front group operating on American soil. So these are the individuals that are funding Abdul al-Sayed. Abdul al-Sayed famously has refused to acknowledge Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. He most recently has referred to Israelis as full of bloodlust and various other hypercharged words such as that. So, it's funny. He plays victim card, Tony, and he has a very winsome face, shall we say. But this guy is an anti-American Trojan horse. I mean, frankly, it's actually not just the Muslim radical connections. This guy literally has said that football is a vector for toxic masculinity. I mean, it's like, dude, you went to University of Michigan. I mean,
he's just retarded.
Yeah, I mean dumb stuff.
Obviously there's an element of this that he said all of the woke phrases back when it was cool, and now he's turning around and he's trying to kind of Tallarico himself out of it, and it's not really working. But what I'm also fascinated by is his inability, it's not an inability, it is his specific choice not to condemn that which would make him now unelectable by the same people that he's trying to woo. So, for example, obviously with the case of the disgusting, horrible Islamic terrorist, again, one of a dozen that this time tried to drive through the Michigan synagogue and the daycare center with explosives. He said, well, hurt people hurt people. It's the some people did something, but with more excuses lined in. And this is something that a lot of people say, well, he's just trying to brush past it. He did say he condemned it. No, the audio was very specific. The way that he phrased that was very specific, because if he condemns Islamic terrorism, he loses the Muslim vote. And if he loses the Muslim vote, it's Kamala Harris and it's Michigan all over again. And he can't afford that. Is that enough? If he's able to simp hard enough for the Muslim vote in Michigan, is that enough to pull Michigan towards him? If let's say many of the traditionally Democrat black voters, traditionally Democrat Hispanic voters, traditionally Democrat union voters stay home in November. Is he making up enough on the margins there, or is this something that's or am I just getting too in the political weeds here with the calculus?
No, you're definitely not. And first of all, I'd actually completely forgotten, frankly, about his comments on the near massacre in the Jewish preschool.
Well, there are unfortunately so many of them that we have to kind of keep them all in the short-term memory, which is a hard thing to do.
No, it's true. I mean, this is a guy who refused to credit the American military for assassinating Khamenei himself because he said that it might offend his constituents. He actually said that. So there's a whole litany of radical statements. And that ultimately, Tony, to kind of get to the bottom line here, is the reason that I think this guy is going to lose in November. There are all sorts of major Democrats. I actually know some on a personal anecdotal basis in Michigan. These are major Democrat donors. They've been lifelong Democrat fundraisers, both Jewish and non-Jewish, and they're now lining up for Mike Rogers. They're now lining up for Mike Rogers.
It's bizarre.
I mean, Mike Rogers is not exactly a MAGA or Tea Party style Republican. He's an established guy. He's been around the block a number of times, which is not necessarily a bad thing for this race. He actually is probably a pretty good fit for these disaffected Democrats who don't want to pull the trigger for Abdul al-Sayed. Now, if you look at the primaries, al-Sayed versus Haley Stevens, al-Sayed didn't do particularly well when it came to either black voters and white voters. Was a lot closer than many have prognosticated as well. So I don't think that he's going to be able to pull this off, Tony. He's placing a huge wager on the Muslim community, on the Ann Arbor, highly educated, downwardly mobile community. But I don't think when the brass tacks actually come to fruition in November, I don't think that he's going to win this thing.
So there are basically two paths forward outside of this then, because as I've often made the case, the far left moves way too fast, way too quickly, way too boisterously. They get way too overconfident, and they're like, hey, look, it's our hand. Abolish the Senate. And everyone's like, whoa, that's about 5 years, 10 years too early to make that admission. And in this case, I think it's a lot more similar than people give it credit for. Specifically, in this case, I see a lot of the far left pro-Islamist crowd that make it very clear that they're fine with the migrant issues, the no-go zones that we saw in Munich 5 to 6 years ago. I mean, they were part of Kurt Schlichter novels over at townhall.com. Now they are quite real, and they are in Minnesota, they are in Michigan, they are in Texas. And so the question that I have to ask is, do we see a change? Or is this Abdul El-Sayed, is this the first primary into a major Senate candidate of many that we are going to see along the Islamic and kind of third worldist migrant pattern? Have we turned a corner and this is the last gasp, or is this just getting started?
Well, that's really the big question. I mean, look, Zohran Mamdani getting elected in New York City, I as someone who grew up in the New York area, Tony, is an astonishing thing. I mean, I remember 9/11 like it was yesterday. I remember the smoke from the Twin Towers. I remember the whole Ground Zero mosque fight, frankly, like it was yesterday. I mean, that was circa 2009, 2010, somewhere around then. And activists were able to defeat the idea that there should be a mosque there at Ground Zero where the World Trade Center site was. But that was a very different New York City than now. Admittedly, though, there's also a big difference between New York City and Michigan. Michigan has been one of the major 7 swing states since 2016 when Trump broke through the proverbial blue wall there in the Rust Belt. So if Abdul El-Sayed actually goes down in flames, and if he loses by, listen, I mean, it's a tough year for Republicans in general, but if he still loses by 5 to 8 points, I think there'll be a message pretty loudly received by the Democratic Party when it comes to nominating people like this, at least in swing states. Like a
woke one kind of message, per se?
Exactly. Well, but what I don't think will happen, Tony, even if he loses, which again, I think he will, I don't think that will affect far left voters in very blue urban districts, New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, etc.
Yeah, fools don't learn moral lessons. I mean, that's kind of that's a basic understanding. You don't take a Bernie supporter, smack him in the face, and him go, "Wow, that hurt. I will change my ways." That's not the perspective there. Again, that's sorry for the kind of out there questions and the weird way I'm bouncing around. I'm still kind of recovering from being sick, and I often forget that whenever you and I get to chatting, how much I'm just like, oh, look, 8 points that I'd love to jump on, because I again, highly recommend your stuff. The Josh Hammer Show, it's over it's over on Salem now, isn't it?
Yep, Salem and Newsweek. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, Newsweek as well. He's an excellent editor. Stellar stuff, dude, as always. Again, apologize for me bouncing around a little bit, but this was a great interview. Thrilling. Glad that you got to come on with us for a minute.
You bet, Tony. Always a pleasure.
All right. Now you guys have survived with me this evening, despite, kind of the chaos. And of course, I'm still a little bit in recovery myself. Two things here real quick on the Abdul El-Sayed stuff. Yeah, the polling is it's not looking good at all.
At 51%, Abdul El-Sayed is at 47%. So in a state that has not had a Republican United States Senator since, get this, 1994 was the last time that a Republican won a Senate race in the great state of Michigan. Well, guess what? Mike Rogers.
All right. Yeah. Oof. Now, again, there's more to talk about this week. We're going to get into it a little bit more. There are some primary elections tomorrow. And then we have some conversations to talk about, about the Senate in Alaska this year. Is Alaska going to flip blue? We're going to talk tomorrow a little bit more also about the president and South Korea. Also, a little bit more on some of the very interesting decisions by all kinds of crews. For example, Attorney General Todd Blanche, new process for, allowing eligible people prohibited from possessing firearms to apply for restoration. There's a lot to cover this week. It's going to be a busy one. If you haven't yet, consider throwing a like and subscribing to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on YouTube. We'd be thrilled. Until then, though, this is the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm Tony Kinnett, nationally syndicated here on the Daily Signal and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.
Every state is home to significant historic sites that tell the American story, but not every site is telling that story honestly and fairly. That's why the Heritage Foundation created the Heritage Guide to Historic Sites. This interactive guide equips American citizens with the tools they need to enjoy the sites that depict some of the greatest moments in our nation's history, analyzing them for historical accuracy, and provides resources for families or educators planning a visit. From Mount Vernon to Independence Hall to Gettysburg and more, Americans deserve transparency, and sites that steward our history faithfully deserve our gratitude. The Heritage Guide to Historic Sites invites every American to rediscover the places and stories that define our nation, whether it's across the country or in your backyard. Visit historicsites.heritage.org to start your adventure today.